Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Woodburn Accountants and Advisors China webinar series on human resource compliance in China. You have joined us for part 2 of this webinar series, where we'll be talking about how to obtain a work permit and residence visa for foreigners in China. The workshop series this week entails 4 sessions where we're looking at a variety of different things. Yesterday, we were talking about the current situation of the coronavirus, as well as just 9 critical issues one needs to know about the employment regulations and the labor law, as well as whether you can hire without having a legal presence in China. Today, we're going to be talking more about what are the guidelines in reference to obtaining work permits and residence visas for foreigners, and generally what is the visa landscape. We'll also be looking at the current status with the coronavirus and how the Entry and Exit Bureau in Shanghai is handling the situation. Our goal at the end of these 4 sessions is to provide both startup enterprises as well as entrepreneurs, as well as companies that are looking to second foreigners to China, to understand a little bit more the landscape in regards to the employment regulations. And that means everything from the actual contract formulation, labor law regulations, to visas, all the way down to individual income tax obligations and social insurance obligations as well. So overall, welcome to part 2 of this webinar series on how to obtain a work permit and residence visa for foreigners in China. Now, this webinar is geared particularly to the newbies to China. So if you have found an opportunity for the Chinese market, or your company has found an opportunity or received an inquiry, and you're looking to gain an education on how things work in China, or you yourself are interested in moving and relocating to China, then this webinar series is there to guide you and protect you to make sure that you are complying with all the local regulations. This also works for startup enterprises in China who are looking to relocate individuals, foreigners to China to operate and build their businesses, or if you yourself are an entrepreneur, to understand what visa applications would be suited for you. And for the experienced China hands, it is always good to know what the current visa regulations are, especially if you're looking to hire interns, newly fresh graduated individuals, or just bringing over people. Then hopefully this will give you new insights into how all of that works and functions. If you are also an experienced China hand and you are a foreigner, then it may be useful to know what is the current status in China about issuing visas for the oldies, so those that have been in China for 5, 10, 15 years, or even those that are hitting retirement age. Now, how this webinar works is basically I educate, I will sometimes ask questions, and you can insert all of that into the chat section and question section of the control panel. Please, this is 60 minutes of your time, so make it as useful and valuable to you. Please interact with me, ask questions, introduce yourself. The biggest question I would have for a lot of you is, are you a newbie? Are you a startup, or are you a China old hand? Why are you on this webinar? What questions might you have? You can already start inserting them into the question section or the chat section of this control panel. Now, you have all been muted, obviously, to avoid distractions and any background noise. If you really want to take value of this presentation, you may also want to switch off your mobiles, grab yourselves a pen and paper to take notes. As I mentioned, use this time to your value. We will be having a Q&A session if there are questions that pop in. If there are no questions that pop in, then we'll skip over the Q&A. A copy of this presentation together with the recording will be provided to you probably by the end of this week, hopefully sooner. It always does take time to upload the video onto our YouTube channel and to get all of that structured and sent out. Now, just one final point, you are on the GoToWebinar control panel. If you are having difficulties with the audio, especially if you're in sensitive jurisdictions like China and the Middle East, then you may find it more useful to switch to a landline or mobile. It will just make the sound a little bit better and more stable. But you also have the option to stick to your computer audio. So what are we covering today? We're covering about China visas, just generally what are all the different types of visas that are issued. We'll also be looking at China work permits. Are you an A, B, or C tier talent? And how does that actually work? We're going to be looking at the new startup visas that were implemented earlier in 2019. And we're also going to be finally looking at what is happening currently under the coronavirus in terms of visas, visa applications, and renewals. Now, why am I able to help you? This is just actually to give you a brief introduction to who I am. My name is Christina Kohler-Kalucia. I'm the head of business advisory at Woodburn Accountants and Advisors. This is just to give you a face to the voice. I am 16 years in the corporate services and compliance sector in China, having been based out of Shanghai. I've helped over 500 international companies with their market entry, market strategy, implementation, and growth within the region, as well as their expansion outside of the China region. I'm also the creator of the China Roadmap program, which is a type of mentorship program for newbies, as well as startups that are looking to get themselves settled into the Chinese market. It's basically providing them direction on what they need to think about, basically the bullet points that you need to know. And I help them set targets and goals that they need to achieve in order to make sure that their structures are implemented, are efficient, are thought through, so that then they can focus on growth. If you are interested in learning more about our webinar series, learning more about our various publications, we send out about 3 mailings a week, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And if you're interested in subscribing, you can do so on our homepage. It's free of charge, or you can follow me, you can follow our company account on LinkedIn. And all of our recordings from our previous webinars are up on our YouTube channel, so you can also take a look and subscribe there, so you're always updated on what pops up with new information. So I guess we should really start off with, why should you be concerned by visa issues in China? And I really want to start off with 2 case studies. So the first case study is basically a company that ignored the rules. And I think one thing that everyone needs to be aware, if they are incorporating an entity in China, by law, you are not allowed, or sorry, your entity is not allowed to hire any individual, until the business license is issued. And in reality, you cannot really hire anybody until you also have your bank account, because how are you to pay salaries? Now, there are a lot of companies that ignore the rules. So this case study that I want to highlight is about a company that I incorporated in Shanghai. It was a restaurant where the individual hired people who were actually operating in the restaurant prior to the business license even being issued. There was a foreign chef that had been brought over and was actually there with a tourist visa because there was no business visa applicable, because the company could not issue an invitation letter. So the individual was there on a tourist visa. He had actually brought over his wife and 3 children on a tourist visa as well. And lo and behold, there had been a denouncement, nobody knows by whom, to the Labor Arbitration Bureau, to the Labor Bureau, where then, I was actually at the restaurant at the time, where 2 unclothed officers entered the restaurant, took all of the workers, including the chef, to a jail where they had to wait for instructions on what would happen to them. Unfortunately, the majority of the workers were Filipino, and they were actually sent back to the Philippines within 3 working days. The foreigner was let go because of his wife and children. but he was required to leave the country until the company was established. Now, all of this, if the owner would have just waited a few more weeks, that the business license would have been issued, and he would have then started the process of doing the applications for the work permits and residence visas, none of this would have happened. But what I saw with my own eyes in that case study was the fact that this foreign chef, his 3 children and his wife saw him being taken away. I mean, that's just outrageous, and something I would not want for anyone to experience, but obviously it does. So if you are a company owner, please respect the rules. Don't ignore them. Don't start business. We all know that you should have been in China yesterday, but let's respect the rules. Don't ignore them, and make sure that you do the applications at the right time and bring people over at the right time. The second case study is that some companies do not instruct the rules, regulations to the foreigners. And what this just basically means is that there is no transparency about the step-by-step procedures and what's needed to be known, so that the foreigners actually are clueless about deadlines, timelines, etc. They don't even know what to follow up on. And that just has to do with internal communication within the company, where it's gone, or actually there is no internal communication. Now, this case study is about an overstaying their welcome. What happened again here was the company was adamant about bringing the individual over prior to any Z visa being issued, meaning that they came over on a business visa. Business visas have certain periods of length of time. The family came over on tourist visas, and the company had said they can stay. There's no issue in staying until the Z visas are issued. Nobody gave instructions about the fact that the Z visa needs to be applied overseas. And as a result, months went by, nothing was issued. There was no transparency or information provided. And the wife and kids actually decided to go back home for a holiday. Not a school holiday, but for a holiday. And they got stopped at the immigration and had to pay an extreme fine because they overstayed their period of the tourist visa. And that was just because of poor instructions provided by the company. So if you are a foreigner that's heading out, make sure that you are aware of what the rules and regulations are. Please ask questions. What are the step-by-step procedures? Because in many times, there are no real proper HR divisions within companies, that just make sure you're the one asking the question. If you are a company owner, make sure that your company is handling all of these things accordingly and are being transparent and open with the regulations with the foreigners. You've got these individuals' lives at hands. They're in a foreign country. You want to make sure that they're protected, and that they can stay there legally. The second part, so the first part of today's presentation is basically looking at the basics, right? It's looking at China visas explained. I mean, we're going to be going through what all different types of visas there are, so people are aware of all the varieties that exist. Now, we all know, or I hope we all know, that there are now certain time limitations where you can go into China for a 48, 72-hour period. I think in some cases it's even gone up to 124-hour period where you don't need a visa to enter the country. Now, I reside in China. I've got a residence visa. I've got a work permit. But I still, if my parents fly, my parents are based in Hong Kong, I still tell them to get a Chinese visa. I don't want them to rely on this 48, 72, whatever, 124-hour rules. I still want them to get a visa to come in. And that's just for security reasons, that they have the right paperwork. Because I know that if they go through immigration, they'll have to show plane tickets. They'll have to show everything to prove that they are only there for that period of time. And every port of entry has different regulations. So, it's just safer to just come into China with a visa. Now, in terms of the visas, you've got the L visa, which is the tourist visa. And this is it's issued to foreigners who will be temporarily in China. The visas can either be single entry, double entry, multiple entry, depending on the stay. So if it's 30 days or all the way up to 90 days. What is very interesting to note is that citizens from the US and Canada, they can apply for L visas that are valid for up to 10 years. So multiple entry and then valid for up to 10 years. The next is the non-commercial visa, non-commercial visit visa, and this is issued to foreigners who are invited to China for non-commercial purposes, like, for example, giving lectures, cultural exchanges. They're there for research. It covers quite a wide range of activities, and it used to be the China business visa, and now that's been relegated to an M visa. So this is really all for non-commercial purposes. Again, can have single entry, double entry, and between 30 to 90 days. You then have the M visa, which is the business visa, and this is for commercial and trade purposes. Okay, so it's related physically to business that is occurring on the ground. Depending on the country where you're making the application for the M visa, it will depend on how much time that you get, but usually it's 30 days all the way up to 180 days, multiple entry. You do need to have an invitation letter that is issued by an entity that is incorporated in China. Okay, so you will need to have that invitation letter. Then you have the work visa, and this is the Z visa. The Z visa is issued to foreigners who are going to be having a full-time employment in China, as well as their accompanying family members. Okay, and we'll talk about the Z visa a little bit more. Now, I know a lot of people who do business in China, but because of the extent of the amount of documentation that, depending on where you apply for the M visa, is required, they generally just go for the tourist visa, where they just have to show plane ticket, hotel reservation, and an itinerary of where they're going, like the cities that they're going to be in and for how long. So I do know a lot of people that just for ease of application, even when they go to China for business, they'll just go on a tourist visa. And I have never heard of any issues surrounding that. If you have heard of any issues, I would love to hear about it, because it's always interesting to know what people's experience are depending on where they're actually doing the application for the visas. The next is the student visa. So obviously this means that you are studying in China and you have a contract with either a university or a school. You've paid an invoice to learn there. And these are the types of documents that the Chinese embassy or consulate will ask for when you're applying for the student visa. There are two different types of student visas. There's the one that's over 180 days stay and one that's under 180 days stay. I just want to highlight here also that very recently, within the last 4 months, 5 months, there's been a new regulation that's come out about internship visas, which is brand new. I'm not too familiar about the implementation processes on that or the documentation requirements, but it is a phenomenal new regulation that came out, because it has been a nightmare to be able to hire interns in China. And what I mean by interns is not students that are studying who then work part-time. I'm talking about actual interns that will be residing in China and will be then in China on an internship visa. So if you are interested in that, again, message me. Happy to then provide you more information if you would like that. The next would be the crew member visa. So this is for crew members of international aviation, sea navigation, land transportation, etc., plus their accompanying family members. You then have the journalist visa, which is obviously issued to foreign journalists, and you have to show who your employer is, which journal, which media outlet is hiring you as a journalist. And again, there are two different types of visas here. One which is either temporary, so for temporary assignments, or ones that are actually a little bit more permanent, where they can get the visa issued for about a year's time. You then have the transit visa. Now, there is actually a transit visa, which is the G visa. The number of people that actually apply for the G visa, I'm not even familiar how many people apply for it, because generally what most people do is they get the tourist visa, which is the L visa, because they tend to always then anyhow stay a couple of days in China. So the transit visa is really if you're just transiting at an airport and you're trying to get a connecting flight to somewhere else, or you're on a ship and you're connecting to someone else. Again, most people just get the L visa. Then you've got the residence visa, which is the D visa, and this is issued to foreigners who basically plan to live permanently in China. It's also known as the Chinese green card. It is notoriously difficult to obtain. Generally, you need to be married to a Chinese citizen in order to be able to obtain it. You have to show a length of period of stay of residence in China, also in order to be able to obtain it, and you need to be quite high up in a company's hierarchy also to be able to obtain it. You then have the Q visa. This Q visa is actually issued to foreigners who are visiting family members of Chinese citizens, and also to foreigners that are spouses of Chinese citizens. And there are, again, two different types of visas depending on the amount of time that you're looking to stay in China. You then have the S visa, which is where you as a foreigner are visiting family that are working or studying in China. It's similar to the Q visa, but the Q visa is related to Chinese citizens that you're visiting, families, members that are Chinese citizens, and the S visa is that you are visiting foreigners that are living in China. And again, there are two different types of visas. There's the S1 and the S2, and that all is related to how much time you're spending there. You then have the R visa, which is for highly qualified individuals whose skills are urgently needed in China. This refers to the Tier A talents, where I will be highlighting that on the next slides regarding the work permits. This is highly and strictly regulated as to who qualifies as a highly qualified person. And I will go through those criteria on the next couple of slides. And then obviously the last one is the diplomatic and service visa, where if you are hired by a consulate, an embassy, or you're staff of a diplomatic mission, government official, or you're traveling to China for an official mission, then you would get the diplomatic and service visa. So let's go on into a little bit about what really is the Z visa. Now, when you are applying for a work permit and residence visa in China, there are 5 steps that need to be taken into account. You need to get basically the first 2 steps have to be done when you're abroad. It's your company in China that is doing that application, where you have to show an employment contract, all the terms and conditions outlined in that employment contract, passport copies, etc. And you're basically going to get 2 documents, one which is, the translation would be a labor certificate, and the other one would be called an employment certificate. Ultimately, it's 2 different documents that you would require. You would then take these 2 different documents, go to the Chinese consulate or embassy in your home jurisdiction and apply for a Z visa. Okay, so you first need the work approval or the labor approval in China before you can even apply for a visa to get into China to then work in China. All right, going to get the Z visa is done at any Chinese consulate or embassy in the home jurisdiction of where you're residing. Without the Z visa, you cannot continue with the following steps of getting the actual formal work and residence permits. So this is something that has to be taken into account. When you go to the consulate or embassy in your home jurisdiction, you do need to provide, obviously, the labor certificate and employment certificate, but also all of the documents related to your employer in China, which is everything from business license, probably to financial audits, etc. So you do need to check the list because, again, every embassy and consulate has a different procedure related to it. Once you've landed in China, the Z visa is usually only valid for a period of 30 days. So you have 30 days to register with the police station, meaning that within those 30 days, you already need to have a place of residence, meaning you need to have an apartment or a house and a lease agreement, which will be shown to the police station. That's one document you will then need to also provide, to also give for the work and residence permits. Now, the actual procedure for the work and residence permits varies really from city to city. In Shanghai, the documentation is quite extensive, and the documentation depends on what tier level you might be in. And we're going to be talking about whether you would be tier A, B, or C later on in this presentation. The M visa or business visa, this was introduced in 2013, and it basically replaced the previous F visa, which is now utilized for non-commercial business. Those seeking an M visa must be invited to the country, so you do need to have an invitation letter from a company incorporated in China. Generally, the copy of the business license is also required to be shown. And the M visa is ideal for foreigners who visit China frequently, but for short business trips. So, you know, you can, in some locations, you can actually get a 1-year M visa, multiple entry, with each entry being up to 30 days. As mentioned, in the US and the States, you can actually get an M visa that's valid for up to 10 years. So just to finish up on the visa issue, if you are applying for any form of visa, the first thing you really need to do is go onto the website of any consulate in your country or embassy in your country to look at the various document lists. I would also always follow that up with a phone call, because things change so frequently and the Chinese consulates are renowned for not updating their websites. So definitely check the website, prepare those documents, and then have a call with the consulate to just verify that those are the right documents that you need before heading out to the consulate to do the applications. So China work permits are something that's relatively new. You know, come April, it'll be 3 years that there's this new work permit system. And it has completely changed the game for foreigners working in China. And I just want to highlight right now, it is a complicated, complex system whereby there is absolutely no guarantee that you will get your work permit. Which probably sounds absolutely outrageous, but honestly, it is a tough procedure to go through. Before you apply for the labor certificate and employment certificate, you need to already know in what tier you're in to understand what chances you have of getting your work permit. All right. Now, the biggest dilemma we've been facing in China is that I have a lot of friends of mine who are older than me, so they're in their late 40s, early 50s, who have probably been in China about the same period of time as me, maybe even longer, so 15, 20, 25 years, who have recently, and plus, sorry, I just want to highlight, they are also business owners, meaning that the companies that they have incorporated in China are theirs, they are the shareholders of it. That they themselves have been denied the new work permits, which means that they have been required to leave China, regardless of the fact that they have a company in China. So I just want to highlight that this is a very strict, very complex system. I would probably say it is now one of the toughest applications to get approved, all right? So the first thing you need to do is go through and understand what the 3-tier talent grading system is and how it applies to the expatriates. Obviously, as you can imagine, if you fall under tier A, you have great advantages and benefits. Tier B is where the majority of people fall under, and tier C is for very special circumstances. So you need to be aware of where you fall, of where you actually fall under. So what are the categories to determine your points? So there is a variety of categories that are available. So first of all, you've got the qualification exclusive of the point-based system, where you don't score any points. This could be if you're an innovative entrepreneurial talent or young talent, if it conforms to criteria for encouraged employment categories, etc. The next one is an annual salary paid by the employer. So to give you an example, you will gain the highest level of points, which is 20 points for this category, if you earn a salary, an annual salary of over 450,000 RMB per year, which is equivalent to about 66,000 US dollar. If you look at the average, which is 11 points, you are looking at earning a salary of between 150 and 250,000 RMB per year. Okay, so the scale, there's a scale system, and depending on where your annual salary is going to be based on the contract that you have negotiated with your company, that will be the score system that is then provided to you. You then have educational qualifications. Okay, so if you want to get the 20 points, you have to have had a doctorate, and basically any of the highest possible international vocational certificates and qualifications. All right. If you just have very simply a bachelor's degree, you are going to get only 10 points. If you have no degree, and this happens to a lot of people in Europe that have potentially don't have a university degree, but maybe have a vocational degree, that doesn't even count. So you would be getting 0 points. Okay, and obviously, the more points you get, the higher in the tier system you're going to be. Work experience. This is also very important. If you have over 2 years experience, and for each additional year, you add 1 point, so the maximum is 20 points, you can earn with that category between 6 and 20 points. If you have 2 years, just very simply 2 years of work experience, you will only get 5 points. Under 2 years of experience, you will get 0 points. And what this basically indicates is that if you have under 2 years of experience, you won't be able to get your work permit. All right. In addition to that, now that there's this internship visa, that might be a way around it. Okay, so let's just keep that in mind. Then if you have already spent some time working in China, you get a certain number of points per year. So for example, if you have worked under 3 years, you get 0 points, 3 to 6 years, 5 points, 6 to 9 years, 10 points, etc. Okay. Mandarin proficiency. So if you don't speak Mandarin, you get 0 points. If you have an HSK level 1, you get 1 point. If you are a former Chinese national, you get 5 points. Okay. Basically, you need to show a certification of proficiency to understand the level of points that you get. The location of employment in China is also considered, but actually here you get 10 points wherever you go. So I don't really see the point of that category. Age is also critical. The highest level of points, which is 15, will be for people that are in the range of 26 to 45 years. So that's the target, basically, that the government is trying to attract people in that age range. If you're under 26, or if you are, so 18 to 25 or 46 to 55, you only get 10 points. 56 to 60, you get 5. Retirement age in China is 60 for women, 65 for men, so it's 0 there. Then you get extra credit points if you have a certain level of expertise. For example, if you graduated from a high level recognized university, if you worked for a Fortune 500 company, if you possess in your own name any patents or intellectual property, if you've already worked over 5 years in China, you get additional points as well. That's just extra credit. And then you get extra credit from a regional level if you are in a category of individuals where there is a shortage of your expertise. So again there. So this is basically the categories. Each category has a scale system where you get between 0 and 20 points on average. Others, you might only get 0 to 5 points, depends on the category, okay? So basically what you do prior to getting any job offer, or hopefully your company does this for you, you figure out what is your tier system? What are the points that you will score on, approximately And there you will know whether you fall under A grade, B grade, or tier C. So let's look at what tier A. So tier A means that you've scored at least 85 points. Okay. You're employed through one of China's regional plans for the introduction of foreign talent. You adhere to internationally recognized standards. So I've listed here a bunch of different criteria as being recognized standards in your field. You are applying for a position in China that is either senior management or technical position in a very large scale industry, or you're working in a research or engineering center, or you have a very high level position at a foreign company in a middle-sized industry, but it's recognized by the catalog of foreign investment industries, or it's an encouraged industry, or it's an industry that's going out west. So it's in the west or central regions. If you are a chairman or a legal rep or a chief manager or technical head for a small-sized industry, or you're working, for example, in a foreign-funded hospital or in a provincial hospital, if you're going to be earning over 6 times the average local salary, or you're considered entrepreneurial and a new industry talent, and you're offering new products or services, or you're investing yourself over 500,000 US dollar. If you have earnings, 3 years of earnings that are not below 10 million renminbi, etc. You can see very high qualifications. All right, you need to be in a very high position or very highly qualified. Now, 61% of the population that have visas in China, they're in this tier B category, where you have scored between 60 and 84 points. Now, the main criteria here is that you have to have a bachelor's degree. This is a requirement. Okay? Otherwise, you won't fall under tier B. And you have to have had at least 2 years of the work experience. Now, here's the difficulty. You need to show in China original certificates of your university degrees, and you need to show sorry, now I've forgotten the word. You know, when your previous employer writes you a letter to prove that you've worked there. So proof of work experience in previous companies. You need to show that. And in that proof of work experience issued by your previous company, they have to show the length of time that you've worked there. And obviously you have your resume, which also has to be submitted, has to match those letters. So it is very critical, excuse me, that you have at least those documents in original available to you. Generally, tier B candidates are falling under a variety of different positions, whether it's management, technical, educational, research. Could be that they're working within joint ventures, that they work within representative offices, whether they have been dispatched to work as chief reps or legal reps, and whether they are technical staff. Generally, they need, if they have a skill set, they need to have the certification readily available, again, in original, to show that they have that skill set. If you are also a teacher of a foreign language, for example, your own mother tongue, and you hold a bachelor's degree or 2 years of work experience teaching, then you can also get in. And generally, these individuals are earning 4 times of the average salary of a local individual. So tier C, I haven't added tier C here because I'm going to add it a little bit at the end. But basically, the tier A comprises about 10 to 15% of the expatriates that are in China. Very, very small portion. You have big advantages. Basically, you qualify under the green channel. You can have your visas approved all within 5 working days. Everything is paperless. Majority of the time, you're not subject to an age requirement, education degree, or work experience. You're really in this very high category of technical and skill set being offered to the country. If you are in Tier B, this requires, as I mentioned, a bachelor's degree and 2 years of work experience at a minimum. All documents have to be an original. And I think the biggest thing that I've put here in red is, and this is what's going to be asked by the Public Security Bureau, is, are these individuals really needed within your organization, or could those roles actually be taken by mainland Chinese, so the locals? You know, when you're looking at Tier A, these are probably, you know, they're designated as individuals that have talents that just don't exist in China. Tier B, you're one of so many. Are you really needed into your company? And if so, what are the reasons that your company is going to provide to say, why are you really needed? Okay. So, for example, is the individual a general manager so that he's going to act as a leader, and he's also going to report back to the headquarters about the financial standing of the business? Or is it a secretary, right, where you could potentially have so many secretaries in China that are local? Tier C is meant for individuals that are not planning to work in China for long periods of time. Okay, they're there for interim periods of time. Or they are individuals that are coming in on a specific Chinese government program. For example, there's one between China and France with it's called the 1000 Intern Program, and they're getting in on that category. Okay, so just be aware, Tier C is, you know, very, very small percentage. So just to conclude a little bit, when the law came out, when this new law came out in April 2017, basically individuals at that time that were looking to renew their work permits, they had no reason to worry. The government didn't want to have any issues arising from it, so they just renewed everyone's visas as the time came. However, now 3 years later, the situation is very different. That I have friends who have actually been in China for so long and have had their visas rejected, and they've had to leave China. So, you know, it's getting to be quite a tricky situation. Generally, the government is looking to attract foreigners that have qualifications in science, technology, engineering, maths, you know, any of these STEM fields. Generally, if you're in one of those categories, you'll face very little problem in terms of getting any form of work permit issued, whether you're a Tier A or Tier B candidate. Lack of Mandarin proficiency has made people worry, because obviously if you're sending a foreigner over, it does not necessarily mean that you're sending them over because they speak Mandarin. You might be sending them over because of the talent skills that they have to run and manage an operation in China. So I wouldn't place too much emphasis on the Mandarin aspect. As mentioned earlier, you're only looking between 0 to 5 points on the score table. You should be analyzing more the age, the work experience, etc. Obviously, if the foreigners are going to are going to move and relocate to regions that are a little bit less saturated, like Central and Western China, then you're more likely to succeed with getting your visa issued. Businesses that are hoping to employ fresh university graduates into entry-level positions, here is where you might get frustrated, and here is where the internship visa might become now the legal loophole to get those type of graduates in. There have been opportunities that have opened up to eliminate the 2-year work experience requirement if the company is registered and based in a free trade zone. So that's something to keep in mind. This has happened a lot with people that have been, companies that have been located in the Waigaoqiao free trade zone. So that's something to just keep in mind. So the startup visa is actually something that is relatively new and came out in spring 2019. It first started out in Shanghai, and it's slowly being relegated out into other areas of China. The startup environment in China has really been booming. You have ecosystems like the China Accelerator, where there are really attracting both foreign and Chinese entrepreneurs who have fantastic, innovative ideas to actually set up their startups in China. And this is the whole purpose of the startup visa, is really for that category of individuals. So it's currently international students or foreign graduates that are looking to remain in China, set up their own businesses, and move forward with their own idea on products and services, okay? The criteria, however, to get the startup visa is that they have to have a plan, a business plan in place to actually invest in the city where they're applying for the startup visa. So for example, Shanghai. In addition to that, once they get this startup visa, it's only valid for 1 year. It can be extended for a further year, but you have to show, again, business plan and documents to demonstrate, and then you also have to demonstrate that you are in the process of establishing a company in that city, or that you have successfully incorporated a company in that city. Once the company is actually set up, then the startup visa would be transferred into a formal work permit and residence visa under your company's sponsorship, okay? So that's basically what's happening in regards to the whole startup environment, which I think is something that is amazing for these fresh graduates who have very innovative ideas. They want to stay in China. They want to explore funding in China, but they need a way to stay in China. So the startup visa is an opportunity for them to get there. Now, let's look at the final part of today's presentation, which is what is happening today in relation to the coronavirus. Okay, so the exit and entry authorities are providing extra help for foreigners staying in Shanghai. I'm only going to give Shanghai because that's what I know. So if you're looking at other cities or jurisdictions in China, you know, you got to check locally. But I can tell you what's happening in China, in Shanghai, and what I believe is happening then in also other cities. The exit and entry authorities have been amazing. They have been readily available, and they have actually now, they are now officially working 24/7. So just to give you some stats, this was published on February 19th by the Entry Exit Administration Bureau. So they are offering urgent services as well as group applications. And since the coronavirus came out up until February 17th, they have issued 400 visas as a fast-track service for foreigners who are in difficult situations. So that would apply to foreigners whose companies have terminated contracts early, or whose visa or residence permits are due to expire while their companies are closed. They can still go themselves to the Exit Entry Administration Bureau. There is service that is provided not only in Chinese, but also in English, where they can get things done, okay? For institutions with relatively large numbers of foreign employees, like universities or companies, the Bureau is also allowing them to do group applications. Lastly, the foreigners normally need to go to the Entry Exit Administration offices, but now everything can actually be applied online. However, you should still have conversations with individuals because the hotlines are open. There is currently an exemption from overstay punishment, so meaning that penalties won't arise if you are overstaying in Shanghai past your visa application. This applies to anybody that has been in Shanghai, whether it's been on tourist visa and they've just, you know, flights have been shut down and whatnot. The entry and exit individuals are becoming much more lenient on that. I've put here certain considerations that have to be made. Like I said, everyone will get a copy of the presentation, so you can also read through this at a later stage. You have to, so as I mentioned earlier, to get your visas, within 24 hours of arriving in China, you need to register with the police station. From October of last year, foreigners have been able to do that application online. And there have been over 30,000 people that have registered their residency that way. You can log on. I put the website here where you can register. Again, even at the police stations, the online function is right now in Chinese and English, and they're adding Japanese and Korean versions later on. So language is no excuse for not knowing what's happening, okay? As a foreigner, you have the ability to communicate. Communication lines are completely open. You can call, you can check websites, you can do applications online. You don't necessarily have to physically go anywhere if you don't want to. So Shanghai has 52 overseas service stations and 6 immigrant integration service stations as well. Now, yesterday I was asked a question about where individuals can take masks. This is actually one of the locations you can also take masks. I highlighted yesterday that individuals can get masks if they contact their chambers of commerce, if they ask friends to courier. Just be wary of the courier services, overseas international couriers, because they won't deliver necessarily to your house because the buildings won't allow it, but you'll have to pick up your packages at a dispatch point. The Exit Entry Administration Bureau right now is open 24/7. They are English speaking. So far, they have taken over 700 calls a day, with 50% of that coming from foreigners. If you are in Shanghai, you can call the hotline at 12345 for any inquiries if you want to know specifically about your situation. Take this opportunity to get in touch with people directly and understand what is happening in the market. So, you know, there should be absolutely no excuses for people to be able to renew as long as the companies are supporting it. Your HR departments should be open for communication as well, hopefully. If not, so if you can't even get in touch with your company and you have this visa, call the hotline and understand what your options are and what you need to do. I have had a lot of friends who are teachers who are suffering a lot because the schools probably won't open until May, and or that's what it's looking like right now. So, you know, a lot of them are in the process of understanding how to get their visas renewed, etc., because they're in difficult situations. You as an individual can go ahead and contact people. Your company can go ahead and contact these organizations as well to find out what is happening. Last but not least, I posted this slide in yesterday's presentation. I'm posting it again today. The coronavirus has brought a lot of panic on a global scale. I just want to highlight, we need to be kind, we need to be supportive. Please get in touch with your team members, get in touch with your customers, get in touch with your suppliers, get in touch with third-party vendors and providers. Stay in touch with people, build a community during this difficult time. The people in China are, they are staying home all the time. They have cabin fever, there is boredom. A lot of people don't have the tools to be able to work because either they don't have a laptop, and obviously their desktops are in the office. So understand these situations, keep the communication lines open, be kind, help, and contribute to the community. We are now in a situation where Italy is affected and a lot of things are closing down in Italy. Schools have been shut down in northern Italy. My husband's Italian and his family is also all homebound at the moment and working from home. So, you know, let's all be kind and generate a community that is kind. I've seen a lot of bad media out there reflecting on the Chinese. It's really not nice. We're all kind of in difficult times, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be spreading out to other European nations very shortly as well, where there will be shutdowns and smart working solutions for people. Here are 5 ways that I can help you, your company, or you as an individual with your visas, and as well as to be protected. I can help with employment advisory. We also draft employment agreements and handbooks. We also do employee due diligences. We can also do company due diligences. I don't get asked that very often, but we can also do that. We also offer an incubation service, which is basically where we can act as an intermediary to hire individuals where the companies are not yet ready to incorporate in China. And then obviously we also do work permit and residence visa applications. If you're interested in getting in touch with me and you want to set up a strategy session, or if you just want to talk, you know, there are a lot of people out there who haven't spoken to people for over 3 weeks, you know, set up a meeting. I'm going to put the link into the chat section right now. So you can actually just click on it, open it up, and set up a meeting with me. Do that right now. Then I just want to touch on very briefly about the China roadmap, because the China roadmap is actually supposed to be a little bit like our mentorship program, which is guiding individuals on their China journey. So it's really directed more to newbies and startups in China that are looking to get a hand-on or kind of like a bullet list of points of what they need to consider when they're developing their business in the Chinese market. So I've developed 3 different milestones, 9 different strategy points that people have to look at. Everything, the first milestone is evaluating the opportunity, creating then a strategy and budget around it. Implementation is all about developing an ecosystem and network of individuals that can help you and protect your business, and that can also help you build your business, all the way to protection and system processes. So for example, the 2 case studies that I started with today's presentation, those 2 companies had no system processes in place to make sure that things were legal, that people were protected, and that things were done in the right way. You can't focus on growth if you're spending a big portion of your budget fixing mistakes. So, you know, you've got to be able to have the time to focus on growth, look at numbers, analyze numbers, be able to interpret and read them so that you can focus on what directions you should take for your business. So this is just a very brief overview of the China roadmap. In March, I'm going to be doing a much more detailed webinar on this subject when we do our webinar series on building up your China strategy. But it's just to give you an idea of why I find this so critical that people and companies should follow it. So let's see if any questions have come in. Okay, so there's a question from Peter, where he is looking to spend 4 months in Shenzhen on a part-time Chinese language course. Whilst on the course, he would also like to consult for business in Europe. And you are looking to understand what are the best vehicles to use and also visas. So Peter, basically, if you're going on a language course program for a period of 4 months, then your program should be able to give you the documentation required for a student visa. So that will allow you very easily to get into the country, do the program for the period of the 4 months. So that's already, you know, 4 months time where you have this student visa. If the program is not offering you this student visa, I'm guessing that you are based in the UK. You may want to think about getting a type of tourist visa. Business visa will be difficult because unless you have a counterparty in China offering you an invitation letter. So for example, if the program would offer you an invitation letter, then you could also get a business visa. My best bet would be to get the student visa. The other option would be to get the business visa if they offer you an invitation letter. It seems like you've traveled quite a lot to China. Maybe you even have a friend who can issue you an invitation letter. And then you can get a business visa. You can always try in the UK to get a 1-year business visa that is multiple entry, where you can leave every 30 to 60 days. It depends on what type of visa they will issue you for that. If the invitation letter states that you need to be for a certain period of fixed time in China, then they can do that. So I will try to get into more detail with you, Peter, a little bit later about some of the other questions that you asked, because it's very case specific. But thank you for interacting with me. I appreciate it. And Peter, if you've got any other questions, you can also just type it in and then I'll come back to you also related to it. If there's anybody else that has questions related to their situation or related to the current coronavirus situation, please do let me know. I'll give you just a couple of seconds to type it in. Otherwise, again, if you don't want to type it in and talk about it openly, then I'm more than happy to talk to you personally. And you can, again, you can set up a call with me. The link is in the chat section of the control panel. And you can set up an appointment directly into my diary. No other questions have come in. So just to finish off today's presentation, thank you all for joining. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about personal income tax liability in China, how to calculate it based on the new income tax regulation that was issued Jan 1, 2019. It's been 1 year of this new regulation, so we'll be looking at what kind of has happened, the pros and cons associated with it. And then on Thursday, I have a webinar session solely on social insurance obligations in China. Because my realization is there are a lot of people out there who don't know what the individual social insurance obligations are, what they mean, what they provide to you. So I'll be going in depth about that on Thursday. And if you haven't registered for them, then you're very welcome to do so. You can do it on our website, which is woodburnglobal.com/events. And I look forward to seeing you all there very soon. Thanks again for joining. And I hope to see you in the next couple of days. And if not, I hope to see you in our March webinar series. Take care and goodbye.